I'm Corey Lang, and we're going to be continuing our project with that high poly crate model that we made in the previous video, and we're going to turn it into a game asset model that is low poly, so it can be used in games. Down below, I provided some links to the max project file that I use with a start file, a start scene file, and a finish scene file, this right here. So let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're first going to take one side and we're going to duplicate it. So we're going to turn this. You can go up here and turn it on snap. Then we're going to flatten this. And then we're going to make a copy of this. Now, when we're unwrapping our lower poly models, it would make sense, instead of having UVs for each one of these, we'll just make we'll put all 4 UVs of the lower poly plane on this one, since they're identical. So first what we're going to do, just to keep everything nice and neat, is we're going to make everything on the 0 plane. We're going to go in the top view. What we're going to do is we're going to make a plane, and we're going to turn snap on, so that way it snaps to the corners perfectly. Note that yours probably has like 4 segments. Just right click and they'll set to 1. Then what we're going to do is we're going to right click, we're going to convert to poly, hit 4 on your keyboard, then we're going to go to inset. Go to the top view. Oops, must have snapped the wrong one. Alright, that's not a big deal. We'll just we'll do that. And that one's fine. Alright, what about this one? Alright. Sorry about that. That was a little error. Alright, once we got that, we're going to select this plane, and then we're going to detach it temporarily. You'll see why in a second. Turn that off. Alright, now, that plane we made, we're going to go to modifiers, and you're going to find shell. You're going to hit V and hit F for front view. Then we're going to move this down to right about where those 2 lines are, right here. Once that's done, you're going to right click and convert this to poly. And then that plane we have, that one, we're going to go to front view, and we'll move it right about where that line is, right there. Okay, now what we're going to do, select everything but that, and we're going to move this over for now. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to unwrap it. So now we can attach this back. So if you go, I have all my modifiers right here, but odds are you'll probably not have this here. So you can go here, you can hit U on the keyboard, and it'll take you to the U modifiers. I forgot to do something, just in case. Reset selected for the X form. You'll have that, and hit reset selected. That'll make sure that your model, when you scale something, that like this is at 100, because if it wasn't, if you were to, let's say hypothetically, export this right here to a game, scale does not matter to game engines. So when you reset X form, resets it back to 100. But in our case, we won't need to do that. And here, we'll put that right back. Okay. Yeah, well. Alright. So once we got that, here, let me reset that. Okay. So once we got that, we're going to unwrap. So we're going to apply a unwrap modifier. We'll turn this off. We'll hit 3 on the keyboard for face mode. And what you can do, if you uncheck this, it'll uncheck ignore back facing, because, you know, if you did that, well, you're not selecting these faces here. Alright, then you're going to go right here, open UV editor. You're going to go to mapping, and you're going to do unfold mapping. You'll do the same thing for these. Alright, without further ado, we'll go to relax. I'll do that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take these, since they're all mostly identical, and we're going to stack the UVs on top of each other so we can use more textile space. So we're going to hit this right here. That's like the equivalent of this, except for the UV editor. Here, we'll put that right there. Let's see. Oop. Turn that 180. Alright, then we'll take this. We'll turn it this way. And if you hold down shift, it'll lock it in one axis. Or what you could do is go to scale in this direction, and you can not do that. We'll do that. Select the edges. If you scale them inward, it'll just make it into a nice, good segment. Alright, and then for these, you'll hold your left mouse button down. There you have it. Alright, there you go. So you got that. Once you have these, we'll turn it 90 degrees, just so we can organize these nice and neat. Actually, for now, let's move this aside. You'll see why in a second. Alright. Now let's do this. We'll collapse this. Now, you would think we would need to model another one of these for this, but what we could do, just a little shortcut, is hold shift down and we could duplicate this. And for now, we'll attach these together. And what we're going to do put it right about here. And then this one we'll put right about here. This line marking up with that one. Alright. If you click there, you'll notice that turns yellow. That'll lock it in one axis. Oop. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. We'll move this over right about here. And then we'll move this over right about here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to hit 4 to go into element mode, instead of like selecting the plane and then these. Instead of doing it like this, you hit 4 we'll select the elements. Now what we're going to do, because the only thing we want to render out that's high poly is the stuff inside of here. So what would make sense is if we kept this, we'll call this technically, actually, we can just call this mesh crate because we're going to be duplicating this 3 more times. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit 4. Hold shift, and we're going to clone an object. Now the good thing is, actually wait, I forgot to do something. You select that face right there. Remember that one we moved to the side? Well, this is why. You know, to make this more visual, we'll do it to everything. We'll do unwrap on everything. Now this is why I moved that one to the side, because if we were to render the texture, we would have rendered 2 alpha maps, 2 ambient occlusion maps right on top of each other, which would look pretty damn ugly. So we'll just move this to the side. Alright, so we'll scale this up to right about, I'll say right here. Now to get the most out of our UVs, let's see. Alright, so this is basically going to be our bottom, and that's going to be our sides. So now, if we hit 4, now we'll duplicate these. We'll clone that as objects, and what we'll do is we'll move these to their appropriate place. Alright, just to check and make sure. Alright, cool, good. Alright, and then we'll move this right about there. Alright. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to call this LP for low poly, and then we'll attach these, and we'll call these HP for high poly. Now you'll see now you'll know what the definition is of what baking means. Alright, so for this, there, we'll put that right about there, and then we'll take this and we'll put it right about there. Alright, and just for safe measures, let's reset the X form on those. Okay, so first things first, what we got to do is we need to set our renderer to mental ray. So we'll go to render setup under rendering. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the bottom on the common tab. And we're going to go to assign renderer. And click those 3 dots and hit mental ray. And for now, we'll see this. I'm just saving it for me just in case my computer isn't glitch and crash. Alright, so then next, once we have our renderer assigned, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our ambient occlusion material. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to use a standard material. If you double click, if you hit M, this will open up your material editor. I'm just going to type AO for the name for ambient occlusion. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to mental ray, and we're going to put ambient / reflective occlusion. And we're going to put this, just left click, and you drag this to diffuse color. You're going to drag this to 100 because we don't need the default, like the shading and the glossiness of the shader. And you'll see why in a second. Now if you double click on the ambient occlusion, we're going to up the samples to 128. We're going to put this to 1. And we're going to use 20 feet. This usually will be a pretty good setting for most objects when you do baking. So now we need to assign it to something called an override material under processing. You're going to check this in, material override. Does exactly what it says. You know, overrides all your materials with whatever's in there. Right now it's set to none, but if you left click, you can drag this to here and set it as an instance. So anytime you alter this, automatically this and this will be the same thing. So we can close this out. Not that one. As soon as I could select it. Alright. You're going to hit 0 on your keyboard, just 0. Once you have your object selected, your low poly object, what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down. You're going to hit options, and you're going to turn this off. You're going to hit X. Now, this padding you want to leave at 2. Padding is basically like extra pixels around like the edges. So when you look at a pixel, you know, being made up of little squares, that pixel has to blend between another pixel, you know, or that pixel has to blend between like maybe multiple colors. For example, if we had set to 0, what would happen is if like if this was 0 right here. Yeah, I'll explain once we're in Photoshop. For now, let's go to diffuse map. We'll set this to 512 for now. Yeah, you'll see what padding does in a second once you're in Photoshop. It'll be a little bit easier for me to explain. So once you hit pick, right here, pick HB, that's your high poly object that you want to bake. You want to select your element background to be white. This is basically like your unused texels. Alright, target's fine, and we want shadows only. We don't want anything to do with lighting. Alright, so once we have that, it'll probably be set to this. You'll put output the source. Alright, then once that's all set up, one last thing we need to do before we start rendering this is, if you look at this, you can see the cage. This blue plane right there, pretend this is like a camera that's pointing downward. So this cage right here, this is what they're called, cages. So right now it's pointing downward. So whatever this is facing downward, anything in between this, it's going to record onto our UVs. Here, hit reset on all these. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to check this on. See the shaded. You don't want it cutting through if you notice the little shade marks right there. But you want it to be as close as possible also. So once you have that, oops. Oh, that's why. I forgot to select a point. See, I thought that looked a little weird. Alright, so once you got that, my brain is not working tonight. Alright. So once you got that, it's all set. Now what you're going to do is everything we got set up here, you're going to hit render. Now you're probably going to get like some like message. Oh wait, one other thing. In your project folder, you want to set a bake folder I usually pick my project folder. What you're going to do is you're going to hit make new folder, and you can name it whatever you want. I call mine bake. And you're going to hit OK, and this is where it's going to save your texture out. Otherwise, you're probably going to get an error from Max saying, like, you know, there's no output path. What you're going to do is you're going to hit render. Now, I would not totally rely on this viewport right here, because this could be very misleading. This may not, like for example, we set this to white, so we automatically know this isn't correct. Next, what we're going to do to take a look at this is we're going to open Photoshop. And then we're going to go to our project folder and then our bake folder. And then this is our objects. Now see, when you're looking, this is what I was talking about with padding. Padding is like extra pixels on the edges, so there's no like bleeding pixels on the edges of like an alpha map, or like the map that handles transparency. Because if we left this, if we put like 0 padding on the object, what you would see is basically a really subtle white border on your edges. Basically, those are your pixels blending with whatever color you picked, which in our case, we picked white. If you picked black or green or pink, you'll have like a pink border around it. However, though, if you have padding, because it adds a couple of extra pixels from your actual object, it'll avert that. It won't do that. Now, if your alpha map, on the other hand, you're going to add that, and then it'll take the padding to 0, because the only purpose an alpha serves is just cutting out unwanted textile data. That's all it does. It's not dealing anything with colors. Now, what I would do, like once you're finally finished, I would go to rendering. I can actually show you right now. If you hit render, hold on. Yeah, I know. Here, disable that for now because we don't need another diffuse map. We just want our alpha map. Yeah, this little checkbox here means it'll enable or disable whatever map you want to render out. So once that's done rendering, you'll open it up in Photoshop, and white means opaque, black means transparent, and anything in between means it's you know, semi-transparent. Now you're looking at this, you're probably thinking, ew, this looks like crap. You know, there's all jagged edges and stuff. That is where you're going to be dealing with pixel sample. If you go to render, like render setup and render, this will take care of that. However, though, note, the higher you make this, the longer your render time will be for that alpha map, because it's having to render out more pixel samples. Like you saw like the last time how quick it rendered out. Now look how long it takes this to render. See, it's taking a lot longer. Usually if I leave it on 4 minimum and 16 maximum, you usually can get a pretty reasonable result. So what we're going to do is we're going to render. Okay, so now that this is rendered, what we're going to do is we're going to disable this, go back up to diffuse. Now we're going to render out a 1024. Oh, and enable that. Alright, so what we're going to do, and also under render setup, we'll set this back to 1/4 and 1/4. We don't really need final gather. If you go into indirect illumination, we'll set that there. Alright, so then what we're going to do is you're going to select our diffuse map. Then we are going to render out. While that's rendering, if you look at our alpha map, now it's a little bit more smoother. It's not, you don't see as many jagged edges. So, I mean, it's not like super ultimate, like super smooth, but it's presentable. You know, while that's doing, if you go to a brush, if you have like a couple of like spots, you can just brush them out. Oh, that's why. Let's set to 22. There you go. There. Alright, so that's rendered out. Now we're going to open the diffuse. And yeah, hit update. If you hold shift and drag, oops, wrong one. Forgot to merge my layer here. Okay, yeah, if you go to the move tool, this is why you'll probably have it starting like this. If you drag this down, and select that tool, hold shift, and we'll have that. And what shift does is it'll center it exactly. So you won't have to worry about, like, you know, let's say you had it like this, you know, if you say, oh, I want it like this, and then instead of doing that, if you just shift drag it, it'll just go right on top. Well, if you notice with the alpha map, oops, oh, the joke's on me on that one. After that, turn my padding on. 2 textiles. And once we got that, okay. Yep, and you did that. Yep. I know. Alright. We'll do that again. I'll drag this down, go to move, hold shift, and drag it right over. There you go. Okay. Yeah, I just realized that. But yeah, you see our alpha map right here? These right here is the padding. Now, if we had it like we did before, where the ambient occlusion was just like this, that means any pixel here, it would have to blend with white. So you would have had a white border. But that's what padding takes care of. It makes sure that your pixels will blend with the correct colors. So we'll name this as alpha, and then we'll name this as AO. Now I am going to use, disable that for now. I am going to use like you can pick your favorite color. This is basically going to be like the color of your grade. Me, I'm going to pick my favorite color, which is red. Hit G. Now you don't see anything because we have our layer under this, but go to ambient occlusion. Maybe hit something like multiply, or maybe you can overlay it for a more vivid look, or a soft light. It's up to you. Now, all this extra this material right here, so what we're going to do, image, canvas size, we'll change this to 512 because we don't need all that down there. And what you're going to do is just select everything. Let's move it down. I'm going to scale it down for a little, I'm going to scale it down just a tiny bit, and you'll see why in a second. Like, scaling it down a little bit won't kill you. It's not going to be a gigantic deal. But do something like that. There, now you got everything all lined up. This is your ambient occlusion. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our scene assets, images. We're going to put JPEG. We're going to do crate underscore 1K because, you know, 1024, and then underscore diffuse. You can name it whatever you want. This is how I name my files. And generally my rule of thumb when I do texture work is if for every 1024 texels, or pixels if you want to call them that, you should be able to get 128 kilobytes and have it look reasonably well without having any artifacts. But that's just the standard I follow. You don't have to do that. Oh, and another thing for the alpha map, go right about here and make this white. You'll see why in a second. While we're doing that, when we save this, I'm just going to call this crate 1K. I was just saving the Photoshop file. Double click, go to images, JPEG, look like that, and then alpha. And there you go, that should work. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to select both of those, hit M on your keyboard. And another thing, I'm going to go to render setup and disable material override, because no matter what material you put on your object, your low poly object, it'll still render that ambient occlusion. We'll do this, and for opacity we will do that one, our alpha map. Now you're probably wondering, well, this is really stretched out of proportion. Well, we just switched our file. Here, you'll see in a second. Easy fix. If you apply UV modifier, watch what happens when I do this. Ah, now it's weird. Okay, so because we only stretched it, here, do that. So once you have that, and now the reason why we add that white bar on the bottom is because if we had our sides here, what would have happened is that this would be totally transparent. There would be no edges. It would just be gone here. Do that, and then I'll do that. Alright. that's your object. Now we're not done. So what we could do is take these, we'll turn this 90 degrees, and like on our first tutorial when we were doing the first milk crate, we just put them in place. So right about there. And stretching, it's not going to kill you a little bit. Unless you're stretching it like, 500% in one direction, then yeah, that'd be a problem. But if it's like a couple, if you're doing like a minor stretch like this, it's not a big deal. It's like it's only a big deal if you're doing something like, like that, it wouldn't work. But do something like that, no one's really going to notice. Alright, so then you're going to hold shift and rotate. Clone the element. We'll put this right in the middle the best we can. And then we'll just do that. And that. Here. And also, let's move this up a little. And hit P for perspective. Now, right now, if you probably render this, you're probably missing a side. A couple of things you could do to take care of that. Like, here, hang on, let me, the only reason mine's showing is because I forced two-sided on. Basically, it says, okay, make all materials two-sided, no matter what. So, let's see. You probably have something like this, which you're probably like, okay, what the hell? What you can do, you can either check this in, or you go to material, select your material, and do this. It's the same thing, except this is just done by a material. So yeah. So, and then maybe what we could do, right click that, just for like a quick specular map. It's not the most accurate way, but it's quicker. Now if you notice, watch what happens if I put a specular level. It's like, okay, well that looks kind of strange. That looks kind of strange. So what you do, if you hit M on your keyboard, find mask, and what you're going to do, you're going to put that there. So what you're doing is you're going to say, okay, I want you to use this map, and I want you to mask off anything that is black. So now you have just that, and now it does specular mapping the right way. Like maybe something like maybe a little too specular. Maybe something like that, perhaps. Maybe not. And yeah, you get this. So, for any of you that are new to modeling, give yourself a pat on the back because you just took a a 7,578 poly object and you turned it into 85 polys, which game engines will really love you for that, because game engines, they're all about efficiency. You know, what detail can you fake? So yeah, hold on one. Oop. I'm just gonna leave that on. So yeah, it's all about how much detail you can fake when it comes to game objects. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you all have a great day. I hope you enjoyed what you learned. Later.